Thank you for joining us another Saturday. Just breaking news. We're also doing COVID-19 testing. Ellie and the team are out there. So you can drive through and come and do your COVID-19 testing. Isn't that amazing? This lady called me last night. She was asking about coming. She said, "Why should I test?" I said, because it then addresses your underlying stress, right? Because knowledge is important. Knowledge kills fear. So if you're afraid and you have knowledge, then fear disappears and so does your stress, right? So it's very interesting that we're talking about our stress response today. So it's interesting that we're talking about stress today, considering that COVID-19 is still here and the flu season is coming, and we are still confused whether we are going to be in lockdown or not. They're actually rioting in London against the potential lockdown as COVID-19 approaches again. So, but here we go. My name is Charles Sine. I'm the CEO of Anti-Fragility Health Clinic. Thank you for joining us from all parts of the world. We're in the thick of our overall response. And so we thought it was really critical to talk about stress today. Stress is a really significant response that was built into our architecture to protect us. That is really what the stress response. We call it, it's a response of the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal. The adrenal sits just next to the kidney, a very critical hormone architecture, the adrenal. It drives sex hormones and those beautiful hormones called cortisol and DHEA, which we'll be talking about today. This is at the core of stress. All of it is hormonal. And so stress is a very important thing for us to talk about because there are two kinds of stress, actually. There is acute stress, which is our normal stress response. That's what God gave us. In the architecture, He built our stress response. He wanted us to have acute stress. And what does acute stress really do to the body? It harnesses the resources required for response. It's really important. What does it do? It signals to the body that you can shut down some things, like the immune system. That's the real danger about stress, because when you're stressed, it shuts down the immune system because we don't need that because we have to fight. It's really important. So stress is immunosuppressant. So when you're stressed, your immune system is not really fully functional. Really important. Why? Because we need the resources for other things. When you're stressed, you can't have sex because sex is not important at that point. You understand? So the body shuts down certain resources because it's stressed, because it needs all the energy, both the metabolic reserve and the physiological resilience to fight the attack. Really important you understand why stress is really the number one cause of most of chronic illness. So we have acute stress, and if the acute stress persists, then it turns into chronic stress. So typically, this is how the stress response looks like, right? Stress is activated, and then it's modulated, it's resolved, right? That's acute stress. Chronic stress is activated, and it is not resolved. That is what makes the stress acute. It doesn't matter what it is, that chronic persistence is now what we're going to talk about. So the normal response is natural. For example, you ate some bad food, right? Like salad in a warm season, and there was staph or some other bacteria, and you take it and you have diarrhea or dysentery. There is an acute inflammation stress response. Your body deals with it, flushes out the back. That's why you have diarrhea, or you vomit, or you're nausea. You clear all of it out of your system. you drink water, take some ICP, you sleep well, the next morning you're fine. That's an acute response. A prolonged response is when you have a GI architecture that's what we call leaky gut and a lot of things, and it persists so that every time you eat, all the bacteria goes into your bloodstream, so that would cause persistent, chronic stress. So let's just look at our stress architecture. So when we talk about stress, we want to look at stress in 4 areas, right? So it's interesting that most people, when they think about stress, they're thinking only about perceived stress. But there is also stress from sleep. We're going to talk about them. There's stress from what I was just talking about, the affections, inflammation, and then there is stress from sugar. So let's start from perceived stress, right? Perceived stress is actually in 2 areas. One is mental and emotional, and the other one is about anxiety and depression. So what really drives stress in the human being? It's this new word they call VUCA, right? Life is volatile, life is complex, life is adaptive, ambiguous, and life is, what's the U? I cannot remember. Unambiguous. So there is uncertainty, ambiguity, volatility, and complexity. So if you look at those 4 things, when people lived in villages, they didn't have the complication of driving through traffic or getting on a freeway. They just went to the river, fetched water, and went back home. Now you have to drive through traffic, you have to check all the lights, you have to make sure you wear your seatbelt, you have to make sure everybody driving around you is driving correctly. So all of that, our lives have become very complicated. They also are very volatile. One day there rains, the next day there's no rain, there's snow, or there is fire, there's dust. There's a lot of volatility, right? You're not sure whether we're going to have a lockdown, whether your restaurant is going to open, whether we're going to have water, right? So there's a lot of volatility. Then there's uncertainty, right? Who's going to win the election? That causes a lot of uncertainty. Some people, like my liberal friends, are hoping they will win. And I know we're going to win. So I'm not stressed about it. But my liberal friends are all stressed. That's why they're protesting and rioting and looting, right? But that doesn't give you any results. You just need to show up and vote. That's a democracy. And when you vote, you win or lose, you have to accept the outcome. That's the strength of the democracy. That's why we live in America. So when you lose, you don't complain. You go home, right? Win or go home. Remember, that's what happens in sports. You don't lose and complain, oh, they were stronger than us. Well, that's life, right? So don't stress. Just take the actions that are necessary to ensure that you achieve the appropriate outcomes. So it's really important when you look at stress. But then there's a lot of people who have a lot of anxiety and they're depressed because they have not really built an architecture for having the ability, or what we call the mental and emotional strength, to manage volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. You have to build the mental capacity for that. If not, you live in a space of anxiety and depression because things don't seem to work out and you run out of people to blame. So it's really important that you manage that. And we have a lot of supplements to help with that. And we're going to talk about those supplements. Let's go to the second area, which is sleep. So there are 2 aspects of sleep. There are people who cannot sleep, insomnia, or they go to bed and they sleep for a couple of hours, they wake up, they cannot sleep anymore. And then there is the issue of light and dark disruption. So first of all, you need to sleep 8 hours. 7, 8, or 9 hours. You know, the younger you are, the more you sleep. And then the older you get, the more you sleep also, right? So I'm getting to that age where I need to be sleeping more. So I tend to take naps and still sleep properly in the evening. But there is also the issue of the light-dark disruption. You need to make sure that you're mostly sleeping at night from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. are the sleeping hours. So people who work at night or who travel across time zones have sleep disruption, and that's part of stress. And that stresses the system. Why? Because we have what we call the circadian rhythm. What's the circadian rhythm? Every cell in our body has a clock, and that clock is driven by sunlight and food. Those are the two key signals that drive those clocks. So when you move across time zones or you disrupt your sleep pattern, those clocks are disrupted, and that causes stress in the system because the clocks have to realign after some time, and sometimes if they're not realigned, then there's disruption in the, or what we call circadian disruption in the overall biorhythms. Very important that you try to always come back and readjust the clocks and ensure that you're resting, sleeping, and ensuring that you're sleeping in dark. The body needs sleep more than anything else. Actually, some animals hibernate for 6 months. So sleep is critical for health and for long-term, for a long life. Because during sleep, the body does a lot of repair work. And so if the body doesn't get to do that, that accumulated stress becomes a big issue, becomes chronic. Right? Like young people, they could party for one night and not sleep, but they could catch up by sleeping 24 hours the next day. That's different. It is when you are not sleeping every night, that becomes a chronic stress. Does that make sense? So if you wake up every night at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., yes, you pee and you can sleep back, that's okay. But if you pee and you cannot sleep again for a couple of hours, that's a problem. That's chronic, and we have solutions for that to ensure that it keeps you asleep naturally. Let's go to the third one, inflammatory signals. So this is really the big one around stress that we're not really aware of, and most of it is in the GI tract, and it starts in the mouth. A lot of people have bad dental health. That means that the immune system is fighting all the time to maintain a balance in the mouth. There are more than 400-500 different kinds of bacteria in the mouth. So dental hygiene is really critical to reduce the inflammatory signals. Then we go into the stomach where there's a lot of acidity. That acidity will kill a lot of things. But as we go further down, the diversity or the balance of the good and the bad bacteria is really critical on a daily basis as you grow older. Why is that critical? Because then it ensures that the lining from the gut, from the mouth, all up to the anus, that lining, it's a one-cell lining. It's that thin because of absorption and excretion across that barrier. Because it's very thin, it's very easy to be punctured, and you end up having what we call leaky gut. Therefore, one of our most popular products, the GI Replenish, if you can bring it out, is really a critical, or the set of GI products that repair the gut is really critical. We also have toothpaste, the silver coated toothpaste and the gel, which are really critical for dental hygiene. So typically, my daughter knows this, her tongue has to be pink, not white. It's a critical issue. We want to make sure, get the one that's in my office. I told Dr. E took it. So get us the toothpaste and something else. Bring some other GI products that we have, like the things, Revive and things like that for coating of the things. All right, so very important. Most people, 95% of people have GI problems. And how does it show up? Constipation or diarrhea. That's why we have the Bristol stool chart. You need to have that. We have it in our bathroom. You need to have it in your bathroom, right? So every time, I know most of you don't want to look at your poo. I look at mine because it's always beautifully shaped. You should look at your poo also. It is your poo, it's not mine. I look at mine, Lucas, and it's always well shaped. How is yours, Lucas? Lucas is making a real not committed judgment on his pool structure. You should look at your pool, take pictures of it and say, yeah, do a selfie of your pool. Your pool's been asking for selfies all this time, right? To say, let's celebrate the pool architecture, right? You need to look at that pool. The structure of the pool is a big indication from the body how well your GI tract. And the smell of the pool, the amount of gas that comes with the pool, the bloating, they're all signals that we have good GI health. GI health is really critical for inflammatory signals. Most people have a lousy GI. If you were born cesarean, you will always have a lousy GI, except they do some of the surgeries they are doing now where they do transplants, where they use a poo and transplant from a very healthy person, right? So it's really important. We have tests here to actually guide you to ensure. So most people who may be good with sleep, good with perceived stress, always have a problem with inflammatory signals that come from. And why is that so huge? This is a huge topic. Because when bacteria and viruses enter the bloodstream, arthritis, all that comes from it. It's a long list of things that cause it. I think I actually attached it in the notes. I'm not sure if I attached it. It might be somewhere, but I'll talk about some of that. So there's a long list of illnesses that come from inflammation. And secondly, the bacteria and viruses also violate the blood-brain barrier, causing a lot of illnesses in the brain. Depression, all those illnesses. Sorry? Parkinson's, lots of different things that make people go crazy, right? It's all the bacteria whistling in your brain. The viruses, they begin to play soccer in your brain. And before you know your brain, you're going crazy. I can hear voices. It's because the viruses just held mass and they were celebrating, and you go crazy from all that noise. So we call that neuroinflammation, when your gut is permeated by viruses and bacteria. It goes into your bloodstream, goes to your brain, and because the bacteria and viruses are very small, they cross the blood-brain barrier into the brain. You have things like autism from toxicity and other things that also violate, and Alzheimer's and all the different, because think about what happens with Alzheimer's and the response that the body have in precipitating the amyloid and all of those proteins to fight the invasion. So inflammation is really, really at the source of a lot of illnesses that we have today. And it also triggers autoimmune illnesses. So inflammation, that's why your gut health, probiotics, taking supplements like SBI Protect and GI to fix the gut, taking fiber, which are prebiotics, taking digestive enzymes. Actually, if there's a number one set of supplements you should be taking, they should be all GI supplements to address this underlying issue, because our food system is compromised. So whether you buy organic, you really don't know what viruses and bacteria are coming with it, right? And we eat a lot of food that is not cooked. We eat a lot of raw fruits, a lot of vegetables that are not cooked, right? You know, in the old country, nobody ate uncooked food. My grandmother didn't serve anything that wasn't cooked, right? In the modern world, most of what we eat is not cooked. And so it's really important that we're introducing a lot of bacteria and viruses into our system. And most people don't know how to wash their fruits and vegetables, right? They think because they got it at Costco, it must be clean, right? So, and they consume it without washing it properly, and that is what causes this big challenge in the overall culture. Sugar, I know you all love sugar. That's why we're all paying a price for it. Actually, sugar in its form, in the way we say it, it's very interesting because in my village there was no sugar.
That's a lie.
It is true. Well, you see, my daughter thinks that she was born and sugar was always around. No.
Sugarcane.
Yeah, but sugarcane is not sugar. Yeah, so sugar was created by these people who wanted you to die quickly.
And coconut.
Right. Coconut is coconut. It's actually, those are good sugars because they're sugars from nature. Right, this refined sugar you put it on your puff and put it on your beignet, and when you go to Louisiana, they put it on your beignet.
So good.
I know, white sugar, they dust it on your beignet. People go crazy. You see their eyes begin to spin, right, just from that white dusty sugar. Isn't that amazing how people love sugar? Sugar causes a lot of stress, right? It's one of the biggest sources of stress. Now all the Korean food I eat have sugar. I complained to the chef and she said, that's how everybody wants it. Who are you? What can I say? I need to just go cook at home, right? Everywhere I go, all the little plates have sugar. Everything has sugar or salt because Americans don't have a taste palate because they don't wash their tongue. So they can't taste anything except sugar or sweet. Spicy, oh no, it has to be sweet or salty or sweet. So if you wash your teeth better, then you can taste the other things because on our tongue there are different taste places in the mouth and you can taste other things like sour, like sweet, like sugar, right? There are other tastes that we need to enjoy. All right? And bitter. Bitter is good for you, like bitter leaf from Africa. When you eat that bitter leaf, it cleans your system, my grandmother used to say. But when I serve it to my children, it's bitter. Yeah. So let's look at these 4 areas of stress. I spent a lot of time on this because it's really important you understand why stress is at the source of chronic illness. Right? 3 things cause a lot of chronic illness. Well, stress incorporates inflammation. The second one is oxidative stress. It's also stress. Everything that kills us comes from stress. Oxidative stress because the cells are tired working and there's no antioxidants to release it, and all the inflammation issues that also come from stress. Stress is at the source of chronic illness. So if you can really reduce the stress, you can actually be healthy. So a lot of people think that it's to exercise, to eat, to do this. No, this is at the core of it. Because if you exercise too much, that's stress, right? Yes, you have a question?
Yes, so it's a 2-part question. The first part is one part of the stress pie more important than the other? So like to say people need to reduce their stress, is the perceived stress more important to reduce or the sugar?
You have to reduce all of them.
Period. Okay.
Period. Yes. But it's a very interesting question because most people think number 1 is more important.
Well, I was going to say, does one lead to another? So like,
no, it does not.
GI cut is like leaky.
Yeah, they are connected.
They are connected.
Yes,
okay.
Because if you're not eating well, then you wouldn't sleep well.
Okay.
Then, and if you eat a lot, most people eat a lot of sugar, don't sleep well.
Okay.
Yeah, right. And then if your GI is pissed off, then your whole night your stomach is growling.
Which leads to perceived stress.
Which leads to sleep deprivation, which leads to perceived stress.
Okay.
Right? And then you're irritable and you're not happy and you think we caused it.
Yes.
And then you vote liberal. Right? So the key issue is how you reduce all of them. Okay. Right? So if you cut sugar, so let's look at sugar. What you do is that you only eat meals that have low glycemic index. What they call what starches do they call them? Sorry? No, Yeah, resistant starches.
Oh, okay.
Those are starches that have low glycemic
Like
index.
sweet potato.
Yeah, like sweet potato. That's why cultures where they eat sweet potato is very good. Or eat a low glycemic rice, rice that has really been pre-boiled. That's why in some cultures they parboil the rice,
And
rinse it before they cook it again. So you're actually eating the real carbohydrate. And if you have insulin resistance and obesity already, you have that problem, right? The inflammatory signals. Sleep, the big one for women and for men. For men, it's the snoring, sleep apnea, which is disrupted sleep, and for women, because they want to change the world at night. So they have that really challenge of the challenge of not being able to sleep after 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., which is hormonal and other things. So really, really important that we understand this sleep architecture, this stress architecture, and all the different things that are important within it that you begin to really manage it. So for example, last night I take a myosedate, and I normally would wake up around 2, 3 a.m. to pee. Last night I woke up around 5 a.m. to pee. I went to bed around 9. So I woke up around 5 a.m. So wow, myosedate, that really made me sleep. Normally I take the melatonin plus magnesium, but last night I took that because, the other thing a friend of mine published was that a lot of people don't drink water at night because they don't want to wake up to pee. But it's also, there's new research that says that if you're not drinking enough water at night, that's why most heart attacks happen around 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. So it's really important that you drink water even if you have to wake up to pee. Really important. Okay, it's very important. So sleep disruption is a big issue, so you need to manage it yourself. And you need to make sure, you can Google it, how do you hack your sleep? The room you sleep in needs to be very cold. Needs to be really cool, around 69, 70 degrees. It needs to be very cool because the body needs that cool temperature to really calm down. When it's too hot and you're sweating, it's going to be significant disruption on the sleep. You cannot sleep deep, right? We need the non-REM sleep and the REM sleep because they're all critical and they do different things in the body, right? That's enough on the stress architecture. So let's move now to the 2 hormones that really manage all of this stuff, our stress response. Cortisol and DHEA, one and the other, they're like brothers. They live together, right? So one of the things that we measure here is what we call the cortisol awakening response. So this is 15 minutes after you wake up, 30 minutes, and 45 minutes. Yeah, 45 minutes. So the diagram I gave us say 45. So this is pre-awakening response. So before you wake up, cortisol is being released from the adrenals. Then you wake up. For me, that's the magic. I've always thought about it. What wakes me up? Because I don't use an alarm. All of a sudden I'm awake. Why am I awake? We don't know the answer. It's because God rang a bell in heaven since I came from there. He rang the bell, and all of us who are part of his architecture, we hear the signal. It's a secret signal. People like Karen don't hear the signal. That's why they.
Because I'm not from heaven.
That's why they're snoring. Oh. Yeah, so that we have to wake up to fix the world before they get up.
Got it.
Right? So you wake up, and the minute you wake up, cortisol is on the rise. So when we measure the cortisol CAR, this is a critical measure. For some people, when they wake up, cortisol is flat. That's why they're tired. So the first thing is, where is my coffee? Because even though they're awake, they want to wake up. Because the hormonal response is not there to wake them up. So when I wake up, I'm awake. Strength, focused, right? Some people wake, they're groggy. They're groggy where they're looking for the coffee machine, right? If you need coffee to wake you up, it means there's something. You should come and do our urine test, saliva urine test. Let's look at your awakening response. That's very important. And then we then look at how cortisol plays out the rest of the day. We're going to talk about that when we look at the dysfunction. But it's very, very important that you know your cortisol response. If not, you'll be taking a lot of different things to prep yourself up, right? So for me, when I wake up in the morning, my morning cortisol response is fine. But by 2 p.m., it drops significantly. So I say, Elizabeth, who's on the front desk, can you get me my True Adapt Plus? And I take one, and I'm back up. It's very interesting. And how do I know that my cortisol is going? I start yawning. Around lunchtime or after lunchtime, I start yawning, and I just feel tired. And when your cortisol is low, you become irritable, right? You're easily irritated, you're easily pissed off, and that's a lot of stress. So immediately, I want to make sure that I manage that very quickly. So I take True Adapt. True Adapt boosts me up. Let me look at it. We have True Adapt Plus here. So we have True Adapt Plus here. It's a stress recovery formula. My eyes are going.
How long after you take the True Adapt Plus does it start?
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yes. In 5 minutes, I'm like up. And it's all natural something. It has licorice. It has shishandra. I don't want to go into all the depth of these adaptogens. These are phytonutrients that are really critical in small amounts. If you look at traditional Chinese medicine, they've always had this in those horrible tasting liquids. Now we've put it in capsules so you can drink it. Your grandmothers used to drink it, no problem. But you're all modern, so we have to capsulize it so you can drink it without complaining about the taste. It has ashwagandha, holy basil, a very, very important solution to that. And then we have New Adapt here, which is a stress reduction formula for people who are very hyper, so you can calm down, right? So the normal cortisol response is that it would stay and then drop. And DHEA is dropping too. You can see that we're going to talk about it. So it should drop naturally and stay low. And so for some people, it doesn't drop. It stays high. Or for some people, it drops to the floor. And there is nothing. So you have to pick them up, right? We're going to talk about that. So it's really important that you understand this cortisol DHEA balance. And the only way you're going to do that, you have to run our labs. Can you give me a sample report for Dutch test? Oh, we have the Dutch test here. It's called the Dutch test plus, Dutch plus, complete with cortisol awakening response, right? It has urine and saliva collection kits, especially for menopausal women. I have done it. That's why I understand my own stress response. And now I can fix a lot of things around that. It's really, really important that you do this test and you understand, because it will not only show you the cortisol and the DHEA, it will also show you the sex hormones, your testosterone, your estrogen, and your progesterone markers, so that you can make adjustments, because hormones are the conductors of the ecosystem. Hormones conduct this system. The minute you are short on one hormone, we start having stress dysfunctions, okay? So let's look at the different areas of dysfunction. Okay, any questions on CAR? Really very important. You can get these notes. Sorry, I didn't mention it. So we have uploaded some of these notes on the Facebook Live. So if you want the notes, you can look at it. And I'll just go quickly what the notes are before we talk about the dysfunction. So if you look at the diagram here, we have our normal short-term stress response, which is what I showed you. the acute stress, and then there's the long-term stress response, which really destroys the adrenal, all the organs that actually produce the hormone. They just get tired. You know, people who are always stressed, you touch them from behind there like that. You know, it's like you're in an office and somebody says hello and you almost fall off your chair. Some people are just highly strung, right? It's like, what are you afraid of? And sometimes some of that comes from trauma, right? Women who've been raped or who things have happened to become really highly strung and very, very, sensitive. And so they need drugs to really calm them down. So it's very important you look at that diagram. The other diagram here that I've included is that cortisol awakening response. And it's very important that you understand that, because being awake and alert and being able to focus is really very important, right? So it's not your husband who's causing you to be pissed off in the morning. It's because your hormones are not running well, right? A lot of people wake up in the morning and they're pissed off. They want to fight. They don't know that because they're irritated because they have low cortisol, okay? And then we have a really big diagram of this diagram here. I thought everybody should have that. It gives you a lot of details of the 4 stress areas in the architecture. And then we included some very complex diagrams on what we call the molecular control for circadian rhythms. The circadian rhythms is very important. I attended a workshop in Chicago last year. The Nobel Prize for circadian rhythms was about 3 years ago, and it's a very important thing. We didn't know that biologically we're controlled by the sun and by food. Our food response and the sun is what controls the clock. And that clock, every cell, every organ has a biological clock. And that clock is ticking. That clock is already pre-programmed for how long it's going to run. So when we talk about anti-aging, what we are really doing is we are slowing the clock. We cannot stop the clock. They did it. They froze something in nitrogen, minus 280, unfreeze it, and the clock started where it stopped. It's really amazing. So in anti-aging, all we can do is slow the clock. So rather than the clock moving like that, it starts moving like an old man. That way you can get to 120 and still be young. That is really at the core of anti-aging. The circadian rhythm, we want to slow it down. So all these things we're talking about health is really to slow down the clocks. The clocks are pre-programmed. All you can do is to slow the speed, but you cannot stop the clock. When you stop the clock, you die. So those clocks are critical. Every cell, every organ, and then they have what we call the central clock in the hypothalamus and pituitary. We don't know where the clock is yet. People have open brains to look at it. There's really no clock, but there is a clock there. And I think that it is a little diamond that God put in there that can receive signals from heaven, right? Mine is really big. When I die, you open it, you will see the clock. Then for the first time, you know what the clock looks like.
Hilarious.
Right? My clock is really a big clock. So it's very important that, so look at through those slides. So let's look at now the dysfunctions. So normally, this is normal. Your cortisol and DHE levels are the normal range. What we call stage 1 is where we call adrenal stress, where your DHEA looks slightly okay, but you have a significant elevation in cortisol. So those people suffer from a hypercortisol, and they call that adrenal stress because your adrenal glands are really pushing to produce. These are people who are just highly anxious, right? They're very, very primed. They're like ready to kill. So if you're that primed all the time, then your other biological functions cannot really be functioning because the body is primed all the time, ready, waiting to respond to some attack. That's what cortisol is for. It readies the body for response. So when you are in that state, you're going to suffer from adrenal stress, right? And so it's important that you do that measure so we can see, right, this is low, normal, and high, where we are looking at DHE and cortisol. So we want to look at those results and see exactly where your cortisol and your DHE levels are, right? And then the second stage of dysfunction is the cortisol is coming down, but DHE is falling really fast. So we have what we call, this is like a progression from adrenal stress to adrenal fatigue. Your adrenal is tired because it's always producing a lot of DHE and cortisol because there are too many signals coming in. Fight, 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 all the time. And so those signals, so if you are in a relationship where you don't love your husband or you don't love your wife or your children are very stubborn like my children, then you are in adrenal stress. then if the children don't leave home, you get adrenal fatigue because you stress until you get fatigued. And then if they come back from college and move back into your house, then you just get adrenal exhaustion. Yeah, right? You're just like, oh shit, I'm condemned to die with these children, right? So it's very, very, and then this is death. Right? Then you just die. And because we have a lot of Korean guests here where Korean women love their children so much, right? Dr. Yi was giving me some data last night. In Korea, most old people are poor because they give their children all the money and then they're sick. And then there's no money to take care of them when they're sick. So they die from adrenal exhaustion. Right? So it's very... No, it's not financial distress. It's stress, yeah. Stress caused by adrenal exhaustion. Right? But because they love their children more than they love themselves. So my children know that I love myself more than I love them.
Wow, thank you for saying it on camera.
Yes, I love myself more than I love them. Because if I'm not around, then they're not going to come and say, Dad, can I have a check?
Yes.
Right? So I have to love myself more. So I try to make sure I keep pushing myself back to normal for my cortisol and DHEA to stay at the right levels. It's really important, the supplementation around that. So let's look at a couple of the supplements so that we have some clarity around this. So when we talk about the stomach, right, really, really important. What is SBI Protect? So this is one that I take at least once or twice a week. It really is from the cow. They took the immunoglobulins, which are really important for rebalancing the antibodies in the stomach that support the rebuilding of the intestinal walls. SBI Protect, very, very beautiful product. We have GI Revive in capsules and in powder. And these ones, plus GI Replenish, that we don't have an example here, help in sustaining and rebuilding the mucosa wall. Really, really critical for absorption. So a lot of people take supplements. If you don't have good absorptive capacity, you're wasting the supplements. They just pull. You're taking our supplements and they go straight out, or they go into your bloodstream unfiltered and then make you irritated, right? Then I was talking about dental hygiene. So this is the toothpaste that I use. Let me tell you what it says here about the toothpaste. Healthy teeth, healthy gums, right? This is a beautiful toothpaste. And we have the gel. We don't have the gel. And then we also have a prebiotic toothpaste. So it is important. You know, a lot of people buy cheap toothpaste. So let me ask, my daughter, why is it bad for you to buy cheap toothpaste from Costco?
Because the toxins, you're swallowing the toxins.
No, the number one thing is
Fluoride.
no, the plastic balls that have been put in there to help you. So when they went to the sea,
Plastic balls.
yes, the thing that is rough in the toothpaste is plastic balls.
Oh.
Yeah, I know, you're American. You didn't know. They didn't tell you.
No.
And you swallow that all the time. And the plastic balls go inside of you and they dance. And then they give you cancer.
Are you serious?
Yes? What do you mean, am I serious?
Did you know?
I know most of you don't know you're Americans. Nobody told you. Especially liberals. We hid it from you. We didn't want to tell you. We told only the white people.
He doesn't know.
Well, because he's been spending time with black people.
Oh, okay.
We told only the white people.
So is it that considered the fluoride? Because I heard that.
No, the fluoride is bad, but that's not just what is bad.
Oh, wow.
But the plastic balls, when they went into the ocean, the floor of the ocean is full of those plastic balls and the fish are eating it.
Oh, wow.
And it comes from toothpaste. Because every time, and then you swallow some. Do you see the point?
I swallow toothpaste all the time.
I know. So here what they talk about this tooth gel.
You're gonna use that now.
Let me talk to you about this tooth gel. It says brush your teeth with it one night like you would any other toothpaste and do not rinse out. Oh, listen. The next morning, I think you'll find your teeth and gums are still clean and smooth, unlike anything you tried before. This is what I have been using now since we found it. It's the best toothpaste and gel. And I never have any toothache, no problem. It is the most amazing. And you know your mouth because you love to kiss. So anybody who wants to kiss you, give them the toothpaste, wash your mouth. Then we kiss, right? If they refuse to wash their mouth, say, I cannot kiss you. My kiss costs a lot of money, right? Then that's the melatonin. Actually, the other day I took the Kappa Calm. You know, like when you're feeling anxiety. Sorry, let me talk about melatonin. So I love the melatonin, but I don't take the liposomal. I take the tablets. I take the 6 milligram. I used to take 3 milligrams. Then I started waking again at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Then I started taking the 6 milligram, and then I was sleeping beautifully. And I could return to heaven and come back in time. Then when I take Myosedate, where is it? When I take Myosedate now, you're supposed to take 3 capsules. Last night I took 2, and I slept like a fish.
Fishes sleep?
They do?
Okay.
You didn't know? If you have a fish tank, you can see they sleep while standing straight. Right?
Are any of these products, especially the sleep products, you know, they have a tendency of being addictive?
Oh, please.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, well, it's only medications that are addictive. So the point is that, Karen, you ask a very interesting question. Some of us are biologically dysfunctional,
Okay.
right? Like people who have to take lithium. If you're lithium compromised, you have to take it. There's no addiction to you need it to survive. So it's not about addiction, it's what you need. And these are all natural products. Let me tell you what's in here.
Okay.
We have calcium, we have magnesium, we have valerian, we have passion flower. These are all natural products.
Okay.
So when I take Myosedate 2, I took 2. Tonight I'm going to try 3 and see how long I sleep. And when I went to tennis this morning, my instructor said, wow, every shot was in. Backhand, forehand. So perhaps I should take that every night before I go for tennis.
Yes.
Improves, I was relaxed and I was hitting the shots. All right, I've not taken Serenity PM, but I hear it's very good. So I spoke about TrueAdapt. So that's the melatonin that I take, the SRT. That's the 6 milligrams, one tablet. So we have a lot of different stress products here that we can talk. Inflammation, we have the powder to reduce inflammation. It's really very important powder. I think I take that like 2 or 3 or 4 times a week. Just because we don't cook, and so you eat a lot of restaurant food, and so you need to really reduce your inflammatory signals. Okay, so let me go back and just do a high overview. This is a deeply fascinated subject. There's a lot of research work that's been done, the role of stress and the HPA axis in chronic disease management. It's a very, very important area of study. It is especially for modern man. The people in the village used to go to bed. My grandparents, when I lived with them in the village, 8 p.m., everybody was in bed. 5 a.m., everybody woke up. That's how many hours of sleep? 9. Now, 8 p.m., you're watching TV. What did CNN say about Biden? People are watching stuff that is not important.
Oh.
Do you understand? You're wasting time with stupid shit. Rather than you should be reading this book. You should be reading this book, not listening to what Biden said yesterday, because he forgot himself.
Oh my God.
Right? So it's important that we really understand stress and the stress architecture and where we are in our lives. I've been doing a lot of work on sleep. I showed my daughter, every time I have a throat irritation or any signal, I take my CP. So I'm on top of that. I've showed you the toothpaste. You need to magnate. I take my probiotics. I take my enzymes. I take my prebiotics, right? You need to, the digestives, you need to manage that. And then sugar, bye-bye, bread, rice, and noodles, reduction, struggling, right? Sleep, fixing that. I have no stress because I have faith. It's very important. Why? What does faith have to do with stress? When you're afraid, it means you don't have faith. Because I have faith that everything is going to be fine. It's been fine so far for the past 60 years. Why should I be worried now? And what is the only worry? What is the only bad thing that can happen to me?
Death.
Exactly. And it's going to happen. And I have to accept it. So enjoy myself. Every day is a fucking blessing. Every day I wake up in the morning and my cortisol is good. Wow, another day I have to deal with Vincent. Right? And today Mike too. It's a beautiful day, right? So deal with it. So, people worry here too much. Whether they are going to buy the Louis Vuitton or their neighbor bought a new car or they're going to build a new house. Like my landlord pissed me off this morning and I'm thinking we should just buy a house. Right? So you don't want to be pissed off. So you want to understand your cortisol response in the morning. You must do the Dutch test. You have to understand where your cortisol response is. If not, you're suffering from those dysfunctions and you're not even aware, right? It's very important so that you use the natural therapies. Because when people say, oh, I don't want to depend on that. No, these are natural, what we call adaptogens. These are phytonutrients that in small amounts really influence our biological architecture. It's really very important that you take them. For thousands of years, our grandmothers knew about them. We just came to the city and we were deceived by medication. And it's all bullshit, right? So you need to find out where you are, and then if you're normal, then that's good. If you're normal and you're irritable, you've just been irritating yourself, right? If you're normal, then you should be happy because you are normal. Some of us are not. I have to take TrueAdapt and I have to take things to sleep, right? It's really important. And then a lot of women cannot sleep at night because their cortisol is too high, or DHEA is not enough, or progesterone, or some imbalance that's going on. So it's very important, guys, that we do these things and we really manage. Especially the incidence of Alzheimer's for women is very high. So if you take care of your GI, then you're going to reduce the neuroinflammation. Then you're going to live a long and happy life with your lovers. Right? Thank you very much for joining us today. Any questions before we finish?
Where does exercise go into that? I think because it's like missing in the management.
Yes. So no. Exercise actually calibrates the hormones. The right amount of exercise. The serotonin and the release of that is excitability. It's an issue of content and happiness. It really has nothing to do with stress. Even though it's helpful. Do you understand? But you have to be careful how much of it you do, because
Doesn't
it
it
could
help with perceived stress like yoga or stretching?
Well, yeah, it does, because it releases those hormones that make you happy.
Exactly.
But that's not really stress. Yeah, right? We're dealing with stress. There are lots of, come on, like we know Dr. E is only happy when she's eating.
Hilarious.
Right? So you can't say she should eat all the time to reduce stress. Do you get the point? Yeah, some people are only happy. You know, Korean, they're only happy when they have chopsticks. Oh my God, look, let's taste this. Let's taste that. Karen too is only happy when food shows up. Once food shows up, Karen thinks, why was life not just about eating?
Period.
Yeah. Right. So it's very important that we understand the difference of those things, right? The outcomes and how some of those hormones would make us feel good. Thank you very much for joining us today.